If you're new to golf and you're struggling with your chipping, there's a very high chance that you're just going about it the wrong way. I'm Dr. Noel Rousseau and I've been coaching beginners to chip for 30 years. And in this video, I'm going to show you the easiest way to learn to chip. So if you're really struggling with your chipping, there's a high chance that you are, first of all, using too much loft and then trying to make your chipping motion a smaller version of your big swing. That is to say, using a sand wedge or lob wedge, and then having this big powerful stance and a slow motion version of a big swing. And that's just really clumsy. So you'll see in that motion, I've got this stance, I've got posture, I'm too far from the ball, and there's this powerful motion which needs to slow down. That's a nightmare. So that first part is easy to deal with, isn't it? So let's deal with the loft. So when you're chipping, your default option needs to be your pitching wedge. The more loft you use, the bigger the swing you're going to need, the harder it is to strike it, and the more destructive the results will be if it goes wrong. So pitching wedge is your default option. So you'll see even in this scenario where, ideally I'd be landing it on the green, but in this scenario, the flag is cut at the front. I can play a little chip and run with the pitching wedge that lands just before, bumbles up, and goes in. I didn't need to play a really high kind of elaborate shot. So your pitching wedge is your go-to option. So you may have noticed those chipping motions look nothing like a full swing. And that's because chipping is really built around our putting motion. So it's essentially a slightly adapted putting motion. So let's have a look at that. If putting is normally feet quite close together, and I'm just rocking my shoulders and arms, and I would definitely advise you to have a go at this, maybe while you're watching. So it's just that rocking of shoulders and arms. You'll see there's no wrists. There's not a great big body motion. Shoulders and arms rocking backwards and forwards the same length. Now for chipping, I need to create the motion where the club doesn't sort of brush over the grass, but actually hits down a little bit. So for that purpose, we lean a little bit left. So it's kind of like a putting motion while leaning left. So the number one rule when we're chipping is our sternum. So feet quite close together. So I've got a club head between my heels, ball in the middle, and my sternum here is slightly left of the ball. And that helps us create that downwards motion and helps us get the low point, the ground contact in the right place. Okay, so what have we got then? We have got now our putting motion while leaning a little bit left, and I'll quickly show you to the ball. Because it's going to feel more like putting, I'm standing much closer than I would do ordinarily. So here's my full swing stance, spine angle, posture, etc. I don't need any of that. I need to stand a little bit closer. The handle will be a little bit higher. And then it is that putting motion while leaning a bit left. And the skill here is to try and have some flow to the motion and have the club swing as far in the follow through as it goes back. So that looks something like this, while crucially, just noticing the contact you're making in the ground. So that's the technique, and it is quite basic. Not to say that it's easy, but it's fairly simple. Let's talk about contact, because you will have noticed, I'm sure, that sometimes when we play a chip shot, we approach it with all the right intentions, but we don't get the ground and the ball goes flying over the green and it looks like we've hit it too hard. In actual fact, we just haven't hit it on the right place on the club. So let's understand contact. Contact isn't about us trying to lift the ball, get it in the air. It's more about the contact the club is making with the ground than it is how we're trying to hit the ball. So if that's the ground, flatten my glove there, we're trying to get the bottom of the club just to hit the ground and slide. And it should make a slight thudding sound. And being able to refine your skills of how you strike the ground is absolutely going to improve your strike. So this is a lovely exercise to refine that ground contact and therefore improve your strike. So I would have a few practice strokes before any chip shot, and in that practice stroke I'm trying to get the club to go backwards and through the same length. All my weight's on my left foot, hence the sternum left. That's really key. Keep the weight on the left foot. And then put your attention on the feel and the sound of the club in the ground. And I'm trying to get a slight thud sound without the club digging in. So too much would be it digging, and too little would be the club just sort of brushing over the top. And what I would ask you to do is have a few practices, and with each practice, just reflect back. Was the ground contact too much, too little, or just right? So we'll have a few. I caught the grass, but I couldn't hear the ground, so that's too little. There's a thud, I like that. Thud on a skid, just right, just right. And in my experience, most golfers' feedback to me is their perception of just right is far too light. i.e. the club is just brushing the top of the grass, which tends to hit the ball with the bottom edge. We've got to get the bounce of the club, that's this sort of bottom bit, hitting downward slightly and creating that thud sound. So I'll recreate that again. There's my thud, it's a thud and a slide. And if I keep my attention on that when I'm hitting the ball, then I should get a nice strike. So let's play the same game. I'm going to strike the ball, but then reflect back on how was my ground contact. I heard a thud, but on that occasion, I heard da-dunk. I heard a double sound, and that is me landing the club a little bit early, and then it sort of slides and bounces into the ball. On that occasion, it didn't really matter. But of course, we call that hitting it fat. So you're listening for that thud sound to be, well, it's actually a centimetre behind the ball, but you'll hear it as the same sound at the same time as the ball. And that may seem overly simplistic to some, that simple notion of ball in the middle, lean left and get really good at that ground contact. But that is how you're going to improve those skills. Oftentimes when we're learning, it's intuitive to think, you know, if I've hit the ball on the top, it's because I've lifted up or moved back. I hardly ever see that. That skill of striking the ground is a skill and it needs practice. And sometimes, in fact, most of the time, it's just about paying attention and getting really good at it. Okay, so let's bring all that together then. So I've got a chip shot of, I don't know what that is, 30 yards. I'm not far off the green. So first of all, I've got to plan where I'm going to land the ball. So in this case, which is, you know, pretty much always the way, I'm trying to land the ball on the green, but early. So in the first few yards, and then it's going to roll the rest of the way because I'm using a pitching wedge, nothing too lofted just yet. And then it's that putting style technique. So ball in the middle, feet together, leaning left, and it's that putting style, next to no wrists, and just trying to regulate how much my club hits the ground. Okay, so let's go ahead and play it. I'm going to try and brush the ground and finish nicely as well. What could go wrong? And that's the point really. If I'm using a pitching wedge, if it did go wrong, it probably wouldn't look that different to that one. And the cool thing is, as you get more comfortable with that technique, it is immediately adaptable to a more lofted club. So this is my gap wedge, but that same sort of putting motion can be used with your gap, your sand wedge, or even if you have a lob wedge at this point, you could use that same technique. It just means having a much longer swing. But essentially, that same putting motion, and crucially, that skill of how the club strikes the ground. So if you're a casual golfer or you're just getting started and trying to break 100 really, you are in the right place. That is exactly what this channel is all about. If you want to know more about the short game and how we adapt that basic technique to more elaborate shots, then I'll be creating a short game playlist linked down here. But before I see you next time, keep practicing, keep it playful, and good luck. Play well.